If you want to develop a more thoughtful approach to how you're mixing or even recording background vocals for indie pop, indie, or pop songs, then I hope this video helps you out. Here, I'll share some of my process for how I mixed the background vocals for my song New You and walk through some of the decisions I made along the way for how I got to that overall sound in the end. Really quick, before we dive in, I'm Marcus. I release my own indie pop music as Cradle Cat, and I also write and produce for other artists. So if you like this content or just want to follow my music, go ahead and subscribe here on YouTube or follow me over on Spotify and Instagram as Cradle Cat. Let's take a look at the specific section of the song that I'll be walking through. It's the final chorus with all of the layers of vocals.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you can't stay the same. Every year we get to grow up, it's true. Every year we forget to change.
So that's the overall sound that we ended up with. And now let's break it down into a few different techniques that I was using. The first one is just how I'm using EQ and choice of vocal register to place the different vocal parts in the mix. So if I solo the background vocals here along with just one of the lead vocals, let's hear how those mix all together without any of the instruments, and then I'll show the specific vocal background pieces that I'm talking about.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you.
So the first thing, before even getting to mixing, something that makes this a little bit easier, or at least in my case it did, is just deciding where I want those different backgrounds to be placed in my vocal range. So the lead vocal, that's where everything's going to be based around, is...
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you...
It's kind of right in between it bounces back and forth between my chest voice and my falsetto for where that is in my range. So it's kind of in the upper end of my chest voice there and lower end of falsetto. And to surround that, along with vocals in that similar space, let's point out a few different register or different areas of my range. So if I look at this low harmony track here.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you.
So we've got that one starting a little bit lower there. And then I find mid harmony here.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you.
So that's more in the second one here, that harmony middle left, that's more in the range of the lead vocal, kind of in a similar placement there. Outside of that falsetto part. And then the last part that I'll point out here is my falsetto piece.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know. It's the right feel of something bubbling up.
So before even getting into EQ and all of the other things that we do in the mix phase, I have these three parts that I really want to point out here. The low part, the mid, and the high falsetto.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you can't.
So those are all already pretty separated just by where they are in my vocal range. And because of that, it's going to make the mixing step a little bit easier because they're not all bunched up in the same frequency range right out of my mouth. That you don't have to kind of mangle it afterwards because they're already separated enough there. Those are all separated by an octave range. So if we're listening to those, we've got
it's the right feel.
Right, and then that second one,
It's the right feel.
right, and then that third one, another octave up, just right here.
It's the right.
Right. So each of those occupying a separate octave is going to make our next step a little bit easier, which is EQing. So once I have those parts laid out, let's bring those up again. You can see that last step is really where I'm shaping the EQ for the placement in my vocal chain here. I go through all of this in another video that I'll link, just sort of my normal vocal chain. But this last one is really where I'm placing it in the mix. And this one, you can see I'm taking out a lot of low end, a lot of the high end even. So let's just hear that.
It's the right feel. It's the right feel.
So you can see I'm taking out a lot of that low end because if I had left that in,
It's the right feel.
I felt that it would have taken away too much focus from the lead vocal. So I want all that focus to be on the lead vocal, and to do that, I'm taking out the low end, which also helps it not build up in this low mid frequency range once I start stacking all of these background vocals. So we've got that on the EQ, and we have quite a bit of reverb and delay, which I'll get into in another step here. So that's on the low harmony vocal there. The mid vocal, which is more in the range of the lead, I'm still taking out some of the low end. Not quite as much because there just wasn't as much low that I needed to take out to begin with, since it was an octave higher. And trimming down some of the highs.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up in.
So just so some of the sibilance doesn't stick out there.
It's the right feel of something bubbling
And you can see I'm taking away some of that boominess that I wanted more on a lead vocal there in the low end. And again, dipping that low mid so that it's not building up after we stack all of these.
It's the right feel of something bubbling.
And then lastly, the falsetto here.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up in.
Same thing, taking down the lows and mids, just kind of taming some of the highs a little bit here. Since that vocal's already in a higher range, I wanted to leave a little bit more of the upper end of the frequency range untouched relative to how much I was taking off the lower ones, just because that's where I'm supposed to be hearing it. I'm supposed to hear those higher frequencies in that falsetto, maybe even a little bit of the breathiness to just kind of bring out the high end of that vocal. So just to summarize how I was thinking about vocal placement here, after the recording step and we decided where to place each vocal in our range, which already separates them or makes it easier to mix them, we then EQ'd it to accentuate which parts of the vocal we want to hear and take away parts that we either don't want to hear or we don't want to build up in the context of the whole background wall of vocals. So the next thing that we do after considering vocal placement and EQing there is just how I'm deciding to pan these to get a sense of stereo width. So if we're looking at this, let's go ahead and just play this.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up and you know.
There's a lot of stereo width of vocals coming from the far left and right. And as you see the panning knobs here, I'm just swinging those all the way left and right, leaving a few down the middle. As I was thinking about this when I was mixing it, I really just wanted to make sure I was leaving a nice pocket down the middle for our lead vocal, so that they're all just kind of cradling the lead right in the middle of your stereo image. The different vocals here, though, I'll call out the ones that I have in the center, which is just the one.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up and you know.
So this is something where in the background vocals, things that I have down the middle of my mix are things that I want to kind of ground it or provide a little bit of a base or an anchor to the whole vocal mix. Just because like when I'm listening to a mix of instruments, when I'm mixing instruments, it's always the bass and kick that we have down in the middle of our ears. And we that kind of just adds to the drive of the mix and doesn't distract going too far left or right. So I kind of think of vocals in the same way, in that I try to include at least like one lower octave or one lower register part of my vocal range down the middle, in addition to my lead vocal, because I feel that it helps ground it a little bit more than it might otherwise. So just to show what I mean, I'll mess around with the volume of this lower piece to kind of bring it out in the mix so you can hear what I'm talking about when I say I'm trying to ground the lead vocal. So I'll mute it so you can hear what it's like without it, and then I'll kind of turn the volume up so you can start to figure out what's missing once I take it away.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up and you know you can't stay the same. Every year we get to grow up, it's true. Every year we forget to change. New you.
So hopefully that helps isolate that lower vocal a little bit within that background mix, and just helped demonstrate why I put that in the middle, because I do feel that adds a little bit of power in that lead vocal being in the middle, even if it's not the exact same, notes. If it's not a unison or a lower an octave lower harmony, if it's just a lower vocal supporting it, at least timed up directly with it, that lower pitch can just make the lead vocal feel a little bit more powerful, by lining it up directly down the middle. Versus on the sides, when we're panning things to the sides, that's calling your attention away from the lead vocal, when you're bringing things up out there. So, for example, that's why these vocals that I was showing earlier, if we look at the double chest vocals, these are the exact unison ones. So they're on the outside, and they're not going to distract from the melody because they are the same melody. They're just a unison double of the lead, just panned left and right. Versus the falsetto here, same thing. It's a unison, but it's
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you can't stay the same.
it's the same melody, but I'm delivering it with a little more breathiness because I want it to feel wider there with that same exact melody. And by boosting the high end and singing falsetto a little bit more breathy than I normally would, it can just add a little bit more space to that main melody. So you're not just hearing it down the middle, you're hearing it on the outside as well. Versus if we look at something like our lows that we showed earlier, then I'm really cutting out the highs and the lows there.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you can't stay the same.
Because I really don't want to hear a lot of that low end on the outsides of my stereo image. That would be like having, like your bass left or right, for what I'm trying to do here at least. And so as we look through each of these, you can see that I'm really cutting down the low end. And if it's anything that I want to call out in the stereo image, that's where I'm boosting that high end so that it kind of calls your attention further away from the center. To summarize that panning step for how I'm thinking about placing them in that stereo image, I'm thinking about, one, how do I support the lead vocal? So how do I cradle it by panning things left or right? And then how do I also kind of help support the lead vocal with anything I do put in the center, and also widen the image without clashing with the lead vocal or without building up too many nasty frequencies when I am putting things on the left and right. So that's why, again, we were cutting a lot of the lows, a lot of the low mids, and strategically boosting or dipping the high frequencies where I wanted to call out attention to it on the outside of the stereo image, or kind of put it in the background and use it more as a texture on the outside. Texture being dipping the EQ, calling out and attention to that edge of the stereo mix by boosting the high end of the EQ. The last thing that I'll go over here that I'm thinking about in background vocals is a sense of space by using reverb and delay. So on all of these vocals, I have a long reverb and a ping pong delay. And on some of these, I believe I also have, I have another delay that's at a different tempo for how I'm setting that up. So the ping pong delay is going back and forth, left and right. And that bounce delay is just going to be at a different time delay than my ping pong delay. So it's a little different sense of space that I'm getting out of that one. The reason I'm using those is to create a sense of atmosphere or space or just kind of vibe that fills in a lot of the blank spaces in between words, or just gaps between phrases, and just helps, I think, smooth things out when I'm listening to the vocals by giving that little cover of extra reverb and an extra vocal sound overlapping with all of my vocals as it's happening. So to isolate that so you can hear it, I'm going to go ahead and play the vocals here, just the background vocals, and mute the long reverb, the delay bounce, and the ping pong delay so you can hear what they're doing. So I'll mute and unmute those.
It's the right feel of something bubbling up, and you know you can't stay the same. Every year we get to grow up, it's true. Every year we forget to change. New you.
So that whole background sound of the reverb and delays happening adds quite a bit of atmosphere behind all of the lead vocals, as you could hear. The difference is pretty drastic when it's soloed, and it just helps for the style that I was going for here. Those kind of big indie vocals or like dreamy vocals. That's where I'm getting a lot of that sound, is just by coating it with reverb and delay, so that it kind of surrounds all of my vocals and makes them feel all smooth by having that going back and forth, left and right, with the ping pong delay and the stereo image of the reverb as well. So those are some of the strategies that I used when I was mixing this song. I use them a lot in a kind of similar thought process when I'm mixing background vocals in my other songs too. Again, it's just, where do I want to place the vocal when I'm recording it? Which part of my range do I want to put it in? How do I want to EQ that vocal once I have recorded it to accentuate where it should be in the mix? And after that, how do I pan it and EQ it even further to kind of cradle that lead vocal and either call attention to or just reduce it to a texture on the outside of the stereo image that we're working with using panning and EQ? And then lastly, we were just showing how I was covering all of it in reverb and delay to add a sense of atmosphere and just a nice kind of feel that goes along with it to smooth the vocals out and give it that more dreamy state for this song. So if you have any questions on this, feel free to drop those in the comments. Thank you for watching this video, and if you liked it or want to see more content like this or just follow my music, go ahead and subscribe here on YouTube and you'll get more of that content. You can also follow me as CradleCat over on Spotify and Instagram. Thank you, and I will see you next time.